There's something deeply unsettling about being around someone who smiles at you but secretly hopes you fail. They say the right things, maybe even do the right things, but something in your gut whispers, this isn't love. This is manipulation wrapped in manners. Today, I want to talk about that unsettling feeling, the moment when kindness feels counterfeit and connection feels conditional. Because not everyone who claps for you is cheering. Some are just keeping rhythm while they wait for you to fall. We're wired for connection, but we're also wired for survival. And part of surviving and eventually thriving is learning how to discern between genuine care and disguised contempt. Did you tell them you got the promotion, and their response? A forced smile, a shrug, maybe a half-hearted, that's cool, before they change the subject to something about themselves, or worse, they immediately downplay it. Must be nice to have connections, or hope it's not too much pressure for you. At first, it feels like you're being overly sensitive, but over time, you realize it's a pattern. These are people who can't bear to see you rise because your success magnifies their insecurities. They don't attack your accomplishments directly. No, they're much more subtle. They roll their eyes when they think you're not looking. They avoid saying congratulations, or they deliver it with a hint of sarcasm. They may even spin your wins into negatives. You're so busy now, you barely have time for anyone. Or just be careful you don't burn out trying to impress people. It's concern on the surface, but underneath it's resentment. They pretend to care, but only as long as you're struggling, because that's when they feel superior. The moment you start thriving, they shrink from support and slip into sabotage. It's not that your win is small, it's that their ego is too fragile to handle it. Genuine care celebrates loudly. Fake concern whispers doubt. Don't confuse their silence for humility or modesty. Sometimes silence is envy with a soft voice. If someone makes you feel guilty or too much for being proud of your growth, take note. That's not love. That's a warning. First glance, they seem thoughtful, always ready with advice, always stepping in when you're overwhelmed. But pay attention to the undertone. Their help doesn't feel freeing, it feels like a leash. You start to notice that their support comes with unspoken rules, expectations, and invisible strings. They might say things like, I'm only helping you because I care, but what they really mean is, now you owe me. They may offer to help you make decisions, but you're not really allowed to disagree. If you do, they get cold, withdrawn, passive-aggressive. Their help wasn't a gift, it was a test of obedience. It's not uncommon for them to bring up everything they've done for you later, especially during conflict. After everything I've done for you, this is how you treat me? That's not love, that's emotional blackmail. They keep a scoreboard not out of care, but to maintain control. You might start doubting your independence around them. You question your decisions. You second guess your instincts. That's the point. Their version of helping isn't about making you stronger, it's about making you dependent. They want to be the person you need so they can manipulate how and when you grow. And when you try to set boundaries, they get offended. Suddenly you're ungrateful, selfish, or too proud because boundaries threaten the control they've disguised as kindness. Here's the truth. Real help empowers. It says, I trust you to lead your life. I'm just here to walk beside you. But fake care insists on steering the wheel. And if they can't drive your journey, they'd rather see you crash. Always question help that makes you feel small. Because when love is real, it lifts you. When it's fake, it cages you. With a smile. Vulnerability is sacred. It's the moment we let someone into our inner world, not because they've earned it, but because we hope they'll honor it. But some people don't see your openness as a gift. They see it as ammunition. You shared your pain, your past, your struggles, moments when you were raw, afraid, and honest. You thought you were safe, but later those same truths start showing up in subtle digs, offhand jokes, or sharp insults hidden behind a laugh. They say things like, you're always so sensitive, remember? No wonder you have trust issues. Didn't you say even your own family didn't support you? It hits hard because those words came from the vault you once opened for them. Now they rattle it like a weapon. They don't confront you with facts. They hit you where it hurts. your fears, your trauma, your past, not in moments of calm, but when they want to win, control, or crush your spirit. They twist your vulnerability into a tool for dominance, not out of ignorance, but out of calculation. And what's worse, when you call them out, they act like you're overreacting. They say, I was just joking, or you're being too sensitive. That's not care. That's cruelty dressed as closeness. People who truly love you will cradle your vulnerability like it's fragile glass. They'll protect it, not because they have to, but because they want to. They know that when someone opens their soul, it's not an opportunity, it's a responsibility. But someone who secretly resents you, envies you, or feels small around you will use your softness as a strategic advantage because they know what they can't control with charm, they'll try to dominate with shame. So remember this, vulnerability is powerful, but only in the presence of safety. If someone turns your honesty into a battlefield, they were never on your side. They were studying you to strike. No matter how calmly you speak, how gently you bring something up, or how valid your feelings are, somehow you're always the problem. With people who secretly resent you, the roles are always reversed. You're the attacker, and they're the misunderstood victim. You could be expressing pain, setting a boundary, or simply asking for clarity, and suddenly you're too emotional, too sensitive, or starting drama. They twist your truth into aggression and your boundaries into betrayal. It's a subtle form of gaslighting designed to confuse and discredit you. These people are masterful at rewriting the narrative. If they hurt you, they'll minimize it. If you react, they'll magnify that. They never take responsibility because that would require humility. And humility is something ego-driven people can't afford. So instead, they deflect, deny, or distort. Even when you approach them with care, this made me feel unseen, or I just need more clarity here, they'll flip it. You're always finding something wrong with me. Why can't you just let things go? You're impossible to please. Suddenly the spotlight is off their behavior and pointed directly at your reaction. This is a tactic of emotional manipulation. They force you into the role of the villain so they can avoid growth. And after enough of these moments, you begin to question your own reality. You think, maybe I am being too harsh. Maybe I'm the toxic one. But here's the truth. Growth-minded people own their impact. They don't hide behind deflection. They listen, they reflect, they apologize. They meet your vulnerability with accountability, not accusation. People who always paint themselves as the victim when you bring up something painful aren't trying to repair the relationship, they're trying to protect their ego. They don't care about healing, they care about control. So the next time you're made to feel guilty for simply expressing your truth, pause and ask, is this love? Or is this manipulation in disguise? You are not wrong for asking for respect. You are not too much for wanting clarity. And you are not the villain in your own story, especially when someone else is busy directing the script to avoid facing their own reflection. They're nowhere to be found when you're hurting, when you need comfort, encouragement, or someone to simply hold space for you. They go silent. No call, no check-in, no gesture of care. But the moment they need a favor, a place to vent, or a boost to their ego, they reappear like nothing ever happened. They'll say, I've just been so busy, or you know how life gets. But deep down, you know the truth. They only show up when it's convenient. Their connection to you isn't built on mutual respect. It's built on utility. You're not a person to them. You're a resource. A pit stop for energy, validation, or support they didn't earn. They might flatter you just enough to keep you available. They sprinkle their praise with just the right timing. I always come to you because you give the best advice. Or I knew you'd understand. You're so emotionally mature. It sounds like admiration, but it's actually manipulation. They're reinforcing the role they want you to play so they can keep accessing your strength without ever offering their own. You start to notice that every conversation feels one-sided. You listen more than you're heard. You give more than you receive. And your value in their eyes is tied directly to your availability. The moment you need something back, they disappear, make excuses, or flip the script. You're so demanding, or why do you always make things about you? But love, real love, doesn't keep score. It doesn't clock in only when it's profitable. True care is present in joy and in grief, in celebration and in struggle, It doesn't vanish when it's inconvenient. It stays when it's hard. So if someone's presence feels like a transaction, not a relationship, believe what you're seeing. People who only knock on your door when they need something were never with you to begin with. They were just passing through, looking for a place to refuel. You deserve relationships rooted in reciprocity, not convenience. You deserve people who show up because they care, not just when it serves their agenda. Loyalty is sacred, but with some people it has a shelf life. The moment you stop being convenient, beneficial, or available on their terms, their affection starts to fade. You notice it in small ways at first. Fewer check-ins, shorter responses, missed milestones. But it becomes clearer over time. Their loyalty wasn't rooted in love. It was rooted in access. When you were the emotional caretaker, the cheerleader, the helper, they clung to you, but the second you needed something back, support, attention, space, they pulled away. Or worse, made you feel guilty for even asking. These people don't see you as a human being with needs, boundaries, and seasons. They see you as a resource, a tool, a role. When you stop playing that role, they retreat, criticize, or ghost entirely. Their version of loyalty is deeply conditional, based on what you can do, not who you are. And here's the kicker. When they return, it's not because they miss you. It's because they miss the benefits you brought to their life, the validation, the attention, the support. You become a pit stop for their problems, but they never fill your tank in return. Real loyalty is unshaken by inconvenience. It doesn't disappear when you're not at your best. It shows up when things get messy. It sits with you in the silence, holds you in the storm, and doesn't measure your worth by what you give. So if someone's affection fades the moment you're not useful, let them go. That's not loyalty, that's opportunism. You deserve relationships where love isn't earned through performance, but offered through presence, where you're valued, not used, seen, not drained, chosen, not exploited. Never apologize for walking away from people who only stayed when it suited them. That's not disloyalty, that's liberation. There's a lie we're often taught, especially those of us with big hearts, that walking away from someone is cold, selfish, or unkind. That to leave is to abandon. That to protect your peace is to be too much or too sensitive. But here's the truth. Leaving is not cruelty, it's clarity. When someone consistently disrespects your boundaries, manipulates your kindness, or feeds off your energy without ever giving back, staying becomes a form of self-betrayal. You begin to shrink, to second-guess your needs, to tolerate what once felt intolerable. You begin to confuse endurance with loyalty and suffering with love. But love doesn't ask you to bleed to prove your worth. Real love doesn't thrive in the shadows of silence and sacrifice. It breathes in mutual respect, accountability, and reciprocity. If you find yourself constantly drained, dismissed, or disrespected, it's not heartless to step away. It's healing. People will call you selfish when you stop being available for their dysfunction. They'll paint you as the villain when you stop performing the role they cast you in. But don't let guilt trick you into staying where your soul is starving. And you are allowed to leave spaces that dishonor your growth. You are allowed to protect your peace without explanation. And you are allowed to say, this is no longer enough for me without guilt. Leaving someone who pretends to care while quietly harming you isn't cruel. It's courageous. It means choosing truth over comfort. It means choosing your well-being over their narrative. It means honoring your worth even when it scares you. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for both of you is to walk away, not with anger, not with bitterness, but with a quiet strength that says, I love myself enough to stop bleeding for people who never asked me to heal. When someone smiles at you but secretly roots for your downfall, that contradiction leaves invisible bruises. It's the slow erosion of trust, the quiet sting of betrayal masked by politeness. These are not just uncomfortable dynamics, they are emotional landmines. And unless we learn to spot them, we'll keep stepping into explosions, wondering why we feel so broken. These 5 signs, subtle dismissal, manipulative help, weaponized vulnerability, twisted narratives, and conditional presence, are more than red flags. They are reflections of hidden resentment, envy, and control masquerading as connection. And the longer we tolerate them, the more we shrink. But here's the truth. You're not crazy and you're not too sensitive. You're waking up. You're beginning to trust that soft voice inside that says, this doesn't feel safe. And that voice deserves to be honored. You don't need to explain your pain to someone who consistently causes it. You don't need to prove your worth to people who only value what you give, not who you are. And you certainly don't need to apologize for drawing boundaries